Hello there. I'm just going to be showing you, you've probably read the title, I'd hope. I'm going to be showing you how to optimize dying light for, not if you have a bad computer necessarily, but if you have anything less than a pretty hefty rig, you might want to turn down your settings obviously to make it run better. And I found that these worked best for me, but depending on your setup, you might want to adjust. So that screwing around, let's get into it. And if you're wondering why I'm being quiet, it's because I'm recording this at 1 a.m. like an idiot. So resolution, that's whatever. All of these are like irrelevant really. I always turn VSync off personally. I just find it causes a lot of issues in most games. But the real important stuff, if you're interested in making this game run better and still look good, if you're having frame rate problems, if you have NVIDIA GeoForce, turn off any optimization that it's done. Really, I don't know why you'd willingly install GeoForce. But if you've got any GeoForce optimization stuff turned on, you'll notice that these stuff, the NVIDIA options, they're grayed out because I don't have it. When I did have it, it really screwed it up. So if you do have GeoForce, turn off these NVIDIA options, turn off all of these. Ambient occlusion, it's pointless. I definitely turn that off. It basically just affects shadows. I've seen before and after of what it looks like on this game, and it really doesn't change anything. I'd turn that off even if it runs fairly well. It is ludicrously it's ludicrously hard to run on even decent PC apparently, and I noticed a pretty big bump in frame rate when testing this out after turning that off. So I'd really recommend. Ambient occlusion does nothing good for you. You should definitely turn it off. View distance is really up in the air. I find that about this level's fine. Turning it up to max didn't affect things too bad. I noticed a bit of stuttering, but really in terms of gameplay, the game's kind of crowded enough buildings-wise that you won't be seeing stuff disappear at a distance. So I would think view distance you'd be fine with about halfway. Again, test it out. You can change most of these settings whilst mid-game. Motion blur, I'd recommend you keep on. I've played without motion blur whilst testing, and it does not look good for this game. It just looks bad. It just looks really bad, and it will probably give you a little bit of motion sickness. So I'd recommend keeping motion blur turned on. It doesn't seem to impact frame rate from what I've seen. Anti-aliasing I have on, but it's always a good thing to turn off if you are experiencing problems. My PC's pretty mid-range, it's nothing incredibly powerful, but not particularly potato-like. If you're playing this on something really weak, then turning off anti-aliasing might help you. It's not too noticeable if it's off, but the game does look noticeably better, I think, with it on. So it's worth turning on, I think, if you can spare the power. Film grain, I didn't notice a difference turning this on or off. Couldn't even really see the film grain that much. In lighter environments, I guess it's more noticeable in the dark, but I've never noticed film grain in anything except like Left 4 Dead. So that's really up in the air. What have I gone? Chromatic aberration, I would again turn it off if you really need to change things, but I didn't notice this having any positive effects. It really doesn't make the game look that much better or worse. It's basically irrelevant, this option. Now, these are sort of the big ones up here. I've kind of saved this for last. Foliage quality actually is kind of minor. I wouldn't put it on low because it just, if you've got everything else turned up fairly high, I would keep this consistent with that if possible because it just looks weird. It's better to have all of your graphics a little bit lower than one thing that just doesn't gel. It's a pretty foliage heavy game as well, so you will probably notice it if it's low, but I keep it at medium just to spare the power because I don't care if grass looks that great really. Now shadow map size, you might not know. By the way, I'm expecting that you know what these are. If you don't, then ambient occlusions are relevant, that's what that is. Motion blur is self-explanatory. Anti-aliasing basically smooths out lines on corners and stuff, so they look more. It's hard to explain, but believe me, you'll notice the effect on games that don't have anti-aliasing where curved lines look really weird and pixely. Chromatic aberration, something to do with colour, I'm not even really sure myself. But yeah, shadow map size is basically how far the game generates shadows, if memory serves. I think that's pretty much what that is. That's the apt description. I'm not sure. I'm not that big of a tech geek, but I keep this at medium because, to be honest, I've not noticed it even on low, but I kind of keep it on medium because why not? My PC can handle it. But if you really are struggling with this game and you're really getting low rates, then yeah. This one's the big one, texture quality. This single-handedly caused me the most lag whilst testing this. And I noticed that because GeoForce turned this up to high when I installed it with its stupid auto-optimize option, thanks NVIDIA. How it's made to be played at 5 frames per second. Anyway, aside from me being salty at NVIDIA, yeah, texture quality, you could turn this down to low, I think, if you want the game to look good and don't want to sacrifice your other settings, but you're still suffering from a lot of stutter and lag. I get the occasional stuttering here and there, but it's really mostly good, especially once it's been going for a little while. But, if the game's been playing for a really long time or it's just booted up, sometimes there's a bit of a problem. I mean, if you've got everything on low and you're still experiencing problems, like, I don't know, that's just a hardware problem at that point. Upgrade your PC or at least clean the damn fans or something. I don't know. But for most people, putting this on low should be the nuclear option. Turning this up to high is not recommended if you don't have a pretty hefty rig. This game came out in 2015 and does look absolutely beautiful, especially considering that age. But yeah, this on high will kill your frames. Frame rate cap, honestly, I don't. I mean, the game for me never reaches high enough frames anyway. It tends to run at more or less 60 FPS, I think, if memory serves. Sometimes it drops down a bit lower than that. Sometimes it can get pretty bad, but I leave this uncapped. Again, if you've really got a potato PC, you might want to bump this down to like 50 or 40, but like at that point, is it even playable? I did try. I was recommended by a friend of mine to. She said to turn down the resolution, and that might help, but it didn't really change anything for me. It just also didn't fit the resolution of my screen properly. Uh, and really, that's pretty much the long and short of it. I don't think audio has much of an effect on. It doesn't really have much of an effect on anything. Also, they put the audio in game. That's weird. So rather than audio, but just my personal recommendation from playing this game, if you're new, is to bump the music down pretty heavily. Good lord, the music can be obnoxiously loud at times, and you might miss out on speech. I mean, this is fairly standard for me. I would normally have music at like just a little lower than SFX, and then speech to the highest. But with this game, there is particularly loud music. Subtitles are off by default, so if you're hard of hearing, I don't put subtitles on my videos, so I'm sorry if you're hard of hearing. You're probably having a hard time hearing this video, but yeah, remember to turn subtitles on. They aren't on by default for some stupid reason. I mean, I have perfect hearing. I still put subtitles on anyway. But all of the default settings are pretty fine. There's nothing wrong with them that I've found. You might find the FOV a little low, but I didn't really struggle with it that bad. It's not the kind of game, it's not like an arena shooter, so I only turn my FOV up on arena shooter type games like Quake or that style of thing. I don't play Quake. Shit like Unreal Tournament or Splitgate or whatnot. Gamma's fine. Actually, I did bump this down a bit for better visual settings. I found that the game was a little bright, so I think I might have bumped this down. I could be thinking of a different game. It might have been. I'm not sure if there's a bloom setting, but now, since we're talking about the optimal setting, this is mostly a video talking about the graphics. I will talk about the controls. I play on the PC controls. I did try it out with a controller, but there's just too many things for a controller to work too well, in my opinion. I'd stick with PC controls unless you're really a die-hard controller guy. I can go either way personally. That doesn't really, not to brag, but I play equally as shit with both. Now, the key bindings for this game are a bit weird. I've altered mine, and I would recommend you alter yours. Crouch is C by default, which not good in my opinion, because like if you look at your keyboard, control, you can easily hit that with your pinky, especially when you're trying to like run forward and do a slide. You're gonna wanna be able to press crouch easily. I think control is superior to C as a crouch button. I keep sprint toggle on, although I'm not sure about it. Sometimes it's just so I don't have to keep my hand on the shift key, but I don't know, I might actually turn that off because sometimes I accidentally toggle off the sprint, but it's not too much of a problem. It's pretty fine. Most of the movement stuff's fine. Where we get into problems I've found is the combat controls. So I think I did change a few of these. I think I kept middle mouse button as equipment. Use 2 is, I can't remember what it is by default, but I changed it to Alt because you use Alt for your but basically use 2 is stuff like traps and a few other things. You're going to want to be able to access it whilst using your WSD move keys, so I use it on Alt because it's kind of out of the way. It's not on a more important key, but it's still accessible. Look back, I would recommend changing that. I don't really use that ability anyway, but it basically allows you to look in your sort of rear view, handy for chases, I guess, but I don't use it. So if you do use it, I might recommend changing that because B is it's a little of an odd placement, but it's not that much of a problem. And really, there's more important stuff that you're going to want nearer to your fingers. Aim toggle, I have that turned off because it's you got to remember it's not just ADS with guns; it's also your aiming for throwing weapons. So you don't really want it to be toggle because you can accidentally throw a weapon if you want it to melee or something. So yeah, aim on Z, fairly standard. Reload on R. But the grapple, I think grappling is Alt by default, and I put use 2 on Alt because the grapple basically you need to be pressing a direction button like AS or D whilst using it, and it's just a lot easier if you can just right click when the prompt comes up and combo that with a movement key. I've had a lot more fun using that grapple move since changing the key binding from what it initially was, and I'd recommend you put it on. I don't know, maybe I'm weird. I've not really watched a lot of gameplay of this game, so I don't know how other people do it. Fairly standard, all of this. I wouldn't mess around with these number bindings because you end up unbinding something and all that. A lot of these, like drop item, you'll probably never use it, to be honest. Yeah, this is all not assigned by default, and to be honest, the inventory pauses the game unless you're in multiplayer, and you can scroll wheel through your weapons, so it's not a big issue, especially because the number keys are taken. These, I mean, you don't really need to assign any of these to be honest, because pressing the I button for inventory, you can then just click on the map tab. Really, you only need one button to bring up your little menu thing. It's kind of unnecessary that you've got 4 keys assigned to it. Yeah, these are pretty much fine, to be honest, as far as key bindings go. Co-op, I don't really play co-op on this. I've not played a lot of the Night Hunter, so I can't speak on this too much, but everything's functional from what I played of it. I've not played the following, so I've not done the driving, but yeah, that's yeah. Mouse sensitivity, you'll notice I did make a bit of a change, I think, from default. This worked fine for me, but really it depends on you and your mouse. What speed your mouse is by default and all that, so I won't make recommendations on mouse sensitivity because everyone's different and everyone's got different hardware. Experiment with it. Mouse smoothing is off by default. I don't like anything that fucks with my mouse input, like acceleration or smoothing. You know, but yeah, this was mainly. I've not tried out the eye tracking, but that could be interesting. I don't have any hardware for that though, sadly. I think that's everything. Mainly this was about the video stuff, so if you've taken note of these settings, again, the big things are ambient occlusion, definitely texture quality. You're going to want to lower that right away if you're suffering any stuttering issues. If you have geoforce, I don't know why you would do that to yourself, but if you have it, make sure that you've got it. not optimized, air quotes around optimized by NVIDIA standards, and yeah, that's pretty much everything. With these settings, it should run pretty good on most rigs. Again, I don't know my exact specs, but I mean, for reference, I never really struggle running everything except Star Wars Battlefront 2. I just flat can't play on this PC. So if you can run Star Wars Battlefront 2 without lag, you should be fine having this with everything turned up. But otherwise, I'd recommend. I mean, my PC is a little. It's a little old. It's a little cheapskate in some areas. It's kind of thrown together. It's a bit weird, but yeah. The main things to remember is just texture quality, maybe view distance. I'm not actually sure if that affects it. From my testing, it didn't seem to do much, but again, it kind of depends on the area of the game. Uh, Anything NVIDIA you want to turn off. Motion blur is a definite must keep on for me, otherwise the game just looks awful without it. And yeah, that's all. Hopefully, if you were suffering with any sort of lag or stuttering issues or crashing, then hopefully this helps. If not, then just keep bumping things down, but prioritize that texture quality and enjoy. Alright, that's about all. See you next time.